Chapter 1 The Demon Skull. Now in the year 995, a company of 3 men, whose names were Garrick von Smythe, Franklin Finn Morris, and Christopher Bjorn Hark, were traveling in the lands of Wessex. They were born as slaves, but were vagabonds, who have no homes or no lands or no inheritance. The Raid of Haldern. Now one day the men had come into the village of Haldern, where they met the lord of that land, whose name was Arthur Janhelm. Now Janhelm was a greedy lord, who taxed his workers more than they could pay. He was hated by many. Now Garrick, Morris, and Christopher came into his hall, asking to serve him. Arthur agreed, and the men took an oath, assuring that he was their lord. Some time later, in the year 998, a tribe of Viking men came into Haldern and pillaged its wealth, and many men were taken captive and brought back to the heathen lands to be made slaves. Arthur Janhelm, who was greatly injured and on the verge of death, called on his servants, and they came to him. And the men who came to him were Garrick, Franklin, and Christopher. And the Lord said to them, I am close to death, and my servants have been captured by the heathens. I command you 3, go into the land of the north, on the ancient pilgrim's way to Grandstone Lake, and take the crown of St. Barthas, which in the ancient shrine. Bring it to me, that I might touch it and be healed by its holiness. So they set out to find the crown in the lake. The village of Bertlin. 3 days had passed, and they came into the village of Bertlin, and they were without food and drink, and had no place to rest their heads. So they went to the parish, where they met Victor the priest. They said to him, Father, we seek the crown of St. Barthas. Our Lord is in need of healing. And Victor said, If you seek the crown, you will not find it, for it has been stolen from its resting place. But thee can go to Grandstone Lake. I suppose it may be there, though the search may take some time. The men were distraught, as they had traveled a great distance to find it. The Vision of Garrick. So Victor offered lodgings in his house, and gave them food and drink. They spent the first night here, and slept well. But as Garrick was asleep, he received a prophetic vision, that he recounted as this. He appeared in an open expanse of land, where no trees or plants or life grew. There were fires burning about, all across the land, and the horizon had no sun, only a black moon. Far off in the distance stood a congregation of evildoers, clothed in black shrouds, wearing dark symbols about their necks. So Garrick spoke aloud, What land hath I entered? But received no answer. Then he turned to his right, lo, to find Morris as a crippled corpse, with little life in him, who bore great mortal wounds. Then Morris spoke aloud, Run far, make haste, ye have brought upon us evil curses from the depths of Hades. The Skull with Horns. Garrick awoke from this, but was distraught, for he did not know what his dream meant. Come morning, the men set out to Grandstone Lake, and began their search there. But not in trees or sand or the depths of the waters did they find it. And for 3 days they continued. Then on the 4th day they stumbled upon an old wooden chest. They said to each other, Surely this is the treasure. So they opened it, but inside held no treasure. Rather, there was a skull with sharp horns. At this the men were in awe, and they marveled at their find for a good while. Some time later, the men came into town, where they met Victor, who saw the skull and was disturbed by its presence. He said unto them, Why hast thou brought a skull of evil? It bothers me. Now take it and strike it on a stone, for it may bring upon us curses. But Garrick, who was stubborn, did not listen to the priest. So he went and brought the skull into the marketplace at Bertlin, where he bargained a high price for it. And many peasants came in awe at the rarity, and auctioned food, silver, slaves, wives. Soon the whole town was allured by the skull, yet no price or pound or trade satisfied Garrick, for he was a greedy man. Then up from the sun-cast shadows came forth a stranger, clothed in a black cloak, who bore symbols of evil, with a blasphemous sign inscribed on his forehead. This man was Beazol, leader of the Death Walkers, but Garrick knew nothing about him, and was intrigued by his sudden presence. So they conversed for some time, and Beazol said unto Garrick, That skull you hold belongs to me. I will pay a fair price for it. With this Beazol had persuaded Garrick, and the skull was sold, and Garrick received a large chest with gold and jewels in it, as a thanks for finding the skull. The Great Curse. When Garrick returned to the priest's house, Morris approached him and asked him what had become of the skull. So he brought out the chest and showed it to the men. But upon opening it, a snake shot forth and bit down upon Garrick's heel, but he stepped on its head and killed it. Then the priest stepped forward and said unto him, The gold was fake, it was a serpent. Then Garrick told them whom he had sold the skull to, who was Beazol, and everybody conspired against him. Then the priest said aloud, I know of this man. He is Beazol, leader of the Death Walkers. What ungodly men are they! Oh, what terrible omens may that skull bring! Now Garrick was enraged, and began plotting his revenge. He knew the skull possessed great powers, for he saw madness it stirred up in the townsfolk. Chapter 2. The Temple of the Death Walkers. So Garrick took a knife and a cross, and set out to the abandoned temple, where the Death Walkers gathered. And he came into a small bush below a window, and peeked in. In there stood occultists, gathered round in a circle, with their hands held high aloft, with a great fire ablaze in the center, to which they sang a bellowing chant. After some time, Beazol stepped forward with the skull in his hands. As he held the skull aloft, the men raised their howling chants, for this was their worship practice. He then spoke an incantation, which caused the winds to blow and howl like the souls of hell, and the fires consumed the air. With demonic power, the occultist's eyes beamed with darkness, like the shadows of Cocytus. They had with them much strength and authority over the spirit world, for their lord Satan had invested unto them. The Demon from Hell. Then out came Garrick from the broken window, but the occultists paid no notice, as they were deeply entranced. So Garrick pulled his knife and prepared for a strike, but before he could, Beazol said aloud, I sense an unwelcome presence. Come forth, ye fool. So then did Garrick step out into the light, and the incantation was broken, so that the cloaked figures could turn their gaze to him. They whispered and conspired, and one said, He is a godly like. To which Garrick said unto them, I bargained the skull to you, Beazol. What a fool I was. Now I hath come to destroy it. But Beazol replied, No hands of the good-willed shall lay upon it the skull of our Lord. So he took up his staff, and with a swirling fling he conjured up a demon that had many horns and sword-like nails. Michael the Archangel. Garrick, though in fear, pulled his knife, and duelled with the hell creature. Much blood was shed, and Garrick was injured greatly. Yet when he was cornered, a blinding light shone above, like a star on the roof, and from it came great lightnings and thunderings. The demon was struck down with fire, and burned till its bones were left on the floor. Upon seeing this, the occultists fled into the forest, carrying with them the skull. There lay Garrick, weakened and distressed. Then from the light came a hearkening voice, "Be not afraid, for I am the Archangel Michael, a warrior of God, and guardian of the Lord's people." Garrick was comforted by his presence. "Why hast thou delivered me?" said he. But Michael said unto him with a loud voice, "It is by the Lord's mercy that thou hast been rescued. Garrick, thou hast been appointed to carry out the will of the Lord, to smite the resurging evil of an age by and gone. But fret not, for I am here to guard thee in the coming days." Chapter 3. Preparation. Going forth from the temple, Garrick rested beneath a tree in the forest for some time, and Michael healed the wounds of Garrick with holy powers, and they stayed there till the coming of dawn. When Garrick had come into the village in the early morn, Morris and Christopher approached, and inquired about the things that took place. Garrick spoke plainly. He introduced Michael also, who stood before them with the likeness of a man. When they returned to the lodgings, they met Sarah Helsing, daughter of Victor the priest, as she had returned from a small journey in the land of Kent. The men of the village admired her, for she was blessed with the gift of beauty, and Garrick saw her fair also. When night was upon them, they conversed around the table, and Garrick retold the things that took place, to which they were profusely angered at the death walkers. "So it was by my hand that they took hold of the skull. So by my hand they shall fall," said Garrick. "I know of the place that Beelzebub had fled to. Castle Blackstone, house of Count Orlok," replied the priest. Michael, who appeared in human likeness, said unto them, "Castle Blackstone is the house of all evildoers, the assembly place of the wicked, and the synagogue of the blasphemous. Only fools set foot within its walls unarmed and unprepared." The Holy Helm and Mail. Then Michael took hold of the curtain of heaven, and pulled it, revealing a beaming light that shone about the room. When the cloud of light had dispersed, Garrick stood boldly, donned in a furry tunic, with a layer of chainmail underneath. He wore also golden cuffs and sturdy leather boots, and upon his head was a golden helm, fashioned with pointy horns and a visor. To him Michael gave him his silver sword, which had seen many battles. But Garrick, who felt unfit to wield it, said to him, "These hands are not worthy of wielding thy sword, for I am unclean. If I were to wield it, surely I would die." Michael replied, "You hold my sword, of which I give thee dominion over. The sword is weakened, however, for thou art a sinful human, and thy hands commit ungodly deeds. And by sin the holy power is diminished. But hold fast, good Garrick, for thine redemption is near." Chapter 4. Castle Blackstone. After a number of nights, Garrick and Michael set on foot towards the castle, and they borrowed a small wooden rowboat, and glided across Lake Grandstone. After some time they reached the other side, and came upon Castle Blackstone, and Garrick said, "What a ghastly sight! Never before hath I seen such fortifications." In order to know its layout, they took some time to study its architecture, and they recalled that it looked as follows. Along the defense walls there stood 9 towers, Roman style, wide and sturdy, and built out of black rock. They were cut clean and sharp, and windows stood like the arches of bridges. There was a deep moat, deeper than any moat Garrick had seen, and it had a straight drop, like ravine. At the bottom of the moat there were sharp wooden spikes that were driven in the ground, and the corpses of those unfortunate souls who fell into it lied mangled among these spikes. There was a strong stone gate, the southern gate, which was the main one. Across the walls of these gates were more wooden spikes, and on these were the skulls of Orlok's victims. The entrance itself had no large door, but was open. The layout inside could hardly be called a castle, but was rather a Roman-style fortress, inspired by ruins found in Britain. However, the buildings were all connected by halls and bridges, which made it easier for Orlok to travel during the day, as he was a vampire. The walls of the buildings were made of black cobbled stones, but were laid with impressive precision. In the center of the fort there stood the tallest structure, which was the keep. There were many halls and bridges that connected to it. As they investigated the castle, great lightning struck down upon the keep, which was the place of Orlok's ceremonies and rituals. Continuing on, they drifted onto the shore and looked ahead. There led a beaten cobblestone path up to the open gate. "I shall rescue thee only in dire situations," said Michael. "This is your battle, so I shall stay put here by the boat. May the strength of God be with you." Encouraged by his words, Garrick set foot on the cobble path, his sword at the ready. Despite the lack of martial skills, he trekked forth daringly, for he knew the important mission ahead. About halfway on the path, a cloud of bloodthirsty bats descended upon him, and they bit and struck him viciously. Garrick unsheathed his sword and swung around wildly, cutting down the bats. "Though I be not worthy of holding this sword, it still holds much strength," said Garrick. And he pressed on and came into the courtyard, and there lingering about was a horde of zombies. They invaded him, but with the great sword Garrick brought them down. He went onward once more, and came into the great hall, where a pack of ravenous wolves appeared, followed by many goblins and zombies. But down came the blade, and they were left in pieces. Now a group of associates had seen these commotions, so they sent a message up to their lord. When he had received word that an intruder was in their midst, he sent out an army of bone warriors. When Garrick came into the northernmost grand hall, he encountered the armies. Numbered there was about 7 tens, and all together they fought against Garrick. Though he was swarmed all at once, the holy sword cut through their bones, and after much battling, there stood only Garrick, for he was the victor. Even so, he was battered with injuries. But despite all, he pressed on and ascended the flight of stairs towards Orlok's keep. Goliath and Beazol. On the stairs he fought against slime creatures, but upon reaching the crossway that led to the keep, he encountered Beazol, standing before the stone doorway. Then Beazol said unto him, "I allow ye no further. Your journey of redemption shall end hither. Ye shall not take one step in this keep as long as I stand." And with force he began waving his charged staff, stirring in the air. Then with a whipping motion a demon came forth with bolts. He was called Goliath, the colossal brute. His weight came down on the bridge, and it began to crack, for Goliath was heavier than stone. Garrick fought against him for some time, but was once more cornered by a demon, and without aid this time. In a desperate action, he drove the sword into the stone of the bridge, causing a great crack to split it across and cave in, and down went Goliath and Beazol into the tumbling rock. Then Garrick caught his footing, and looked, lo, the bridge was gone, and there was no way across the keep. So Garrick went down into the dungeons, beneath Blackstone Castle, wherein he encountered mobs of flesh monsters, and bats and gremlins alike, but not one beast could withstand the piercing blade. The Adulterous Witch. Soon Garrick became lost among the labyrinth of the dungeon, for he had gone too far, beyond the torch-lit hallways, and into the darkest depths, where no prisoner was kept captive. He was greatly afraid, but as he searched his way, a comforting light beamed from the end of the hall. So he followed further, and the light became greater, and he trembled over to find an appealing sight. Before him there stood a woman, beautiful and fair, with silky gold hair and skin as white as marble, bathing under a streaming fountain. And she said to him, speaking with the voice of a songbird, "Fairest dear, I long for thee. Step into these pristine waters." At this he removed his boots and came in, for he was under a deep trance. But as he stepped, the hot waters awoke him, and he came to. And he looked, behold, the waters became blood, and the woman cut off her skin, revealing a witch underneath. She cackled at his idiocy, saying to him, "What fool art thou? A man's eyes lead his feet, and they fall into traps of desire. Oh, how foolish art thou!" Immediately Garrick withdrew from her, and unsheathed his sword, with great force, and the tip of the blade touched the pool, causing fire to spread about. The witch flew up and swarmed Garrick with a flurry of slashes on his arm, but he swung around his sword in the air, cutting the skin of the witch, and after some time she succumbed to the loss of blood, and fell into the pool of fiery blood. Garrick said aloud, "Cursed be the demons of lust, for many have been caught in the snares of sin." Cyrus the Prisoner. Onward went Garrick into the waterways, where he slashed his way through hordes of sludges and slimes, and cut apart the zombies, and stabbed at the skeletons. As he reached the stairs, he saw a prisoner behind the rusted iron bars. He knew not why he was there, but he approached him calmly. His name was Cyrus Jolheim. He was a poor and wretched man, and spent his days lamenting and eating the flesh of zombies. He saw Garrick, and said unto him, "Who is this that cometh to save me? Please, I am poor in spirit, and I thirst greatly." But Garrick said back, "I fight for a just cause, and your despair has made me sorrowful." So Cyrus then said, "What bringeth the likes of you here? No man reacheth these ends of the castle. Great is your willpower." So Garrick replied, "I am here to slay the forces of evil. There is something within these walls that, by fate, hath come to destroy. This very thing has been given into sinful hands, into they who plot evil." Astonished, Cyrus spoke again, "What a righteous man art thou! I wish thee strength and courage from hither." Garrick once more saith to him, "Righteous I am not, but humble art thee. I shall deliver thee from your bindings." At this he took out the sword and cut away the iron bars, releasing Cyrus into the halls of the Blackstone Castle. Taking a rib cage from a nearby skeleton, he crafted a breastplate, and taking also an arm bone, he sharpened the end to make a knife. He gave these to Cyrus, and he took them. Overwhelmed with gratitude, he thanked Garrick for his good deeds, and set out into the waterways under the castle. And Cyrus escaped the castle, and fled back to his homeland, where he began a family of his own. Cyrus would one day reunite with Garrick, but these tales I shall tell in another chronicle. The Treasury. Going hence from there, Garrick took the stairs up and led into the eastern wing of the castle. He stumbled upon a hidden treasury, full of gold and precious jewels. He succumbed to the desire of greed, and lost sight of his mission. There stood mounds of gold and iron, armor and weapons, chests and barrels abounding with jade and rubies, diamonds and sapphire alike. The room sparkled greatly, and Garrick became drunken with delight, for he had never seen so many treasures and valuables in his life. and he looked upon the greatest mound, lying at the center of the room, and marveled at its beauty. But the most excellent sight of all was the sparkling crown that sat atop its peak. From forth beams of many colors radiated. Garrick was enchanted by its splendor, so he climbed the side of the mound and reached out to grasp it. Immediately the crown's frame began melting, and the molten gold scorched Garrick's fingers, and the crown melted away. And he heard a laugh from a distant corridor, instilling fear in him, for the devil had caught him once more. Belgarath, the Serpent of Greed. Immediately the mound's peak shifted and cracked, and up from the ren came Belgarath, the shining serpent, that let out a shrieking cry, and engaged in battle with Garrick, and he received many great injuries from its fangs, as it was nimble and agile. But soon Garrick discovered its weakness was its eyes, as they had no covering, for they were made of brittle rubies, and shattered easily. Taking hold firmly of the sword, he launched it across the room, and faithfully struck down Belgarath by piercing its left eye. Venaris, the Dragon of Toxins. Garrick went onward unto the stairwell once more, and entered the easternmost tower, where he was bombarded with hauntings of poltergeists and a troop of armed bonemen. But the sword kept sharp, and made clear the fiends that troubled him so. Up the winding stairs went he, but met Venaris the poison drake, who was obstructing the door that led unto the bridge. A ghastly smog came forth from its nostrils, concealing Garrick's vision, and burning his skin. From this he was left in disarray, and could not see Venaris in front of him. Despite all his courage prevailed, for unto him a voice had spoken, "Garrick, my son, keep steadfast in thy faith. Let thy sword fall, and I shall guide thine blade unto thine enemy." And Garrick did so courageously, and with a guiding hand he pierced the forehead of Venaris. Gruffham, the executioner. Onward went Garrick, towards the eastern Dansker. He looked ahead, and behold, there stood Gruffham the executioner, who carried a blood-stained axe, and wore a leather belt upon his waist, and donned a chain-mail tunic. Brazenly Garrick approached, and the two broke out in battle, and they fought for some time. Gruffham was a violent and barbarous man, but Garrick was much quicker, so he launched a biting stab at Gruffham's heart. Then he began to bleed out, and within a few moments he fell dead. Garrick, being encouraged by his victories, went forth into the Orloc's keep arrogantly. End of chapter 1 to 4.